Here's your humiliating, you broke piece of trash.
Garrett Harmon snatched the dish of coins and hurled them at the black man's chest. Quarters slammed off his jacket. Dimes clattered across the cold marble. The man staggered. The whole restaurant froze.
Sir, why?
Because that's all a worthless nobody like you deserves.
Garrett seized his collar and wrenched him close.
Coins. The filthiest money in this country. Perfect for filth like you.
But sir, I paid you properly.
Shut your mouth!
He slammed him to his knees and kicked a quarter into his shin.
Look at you. On your knees, begging for coins, that's your whole miserable life.
He crushed the man's fingers under his shoe.
Security. Drag him out.
40 guests sat paralyzed, dead silent. What happened next destroyed Garrett's career, his name, and his entire life. Phew, but to understand what happened next, we got to go back to how this whole night started. 5:30 on a Tuesday evening. The sun hung low over the tree-lined streets of Briarfield, a quiet suburb 20 miles outside the city. Sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns. German sedans sat parked in wide driveways. Everything about this town whispered money, old money, quiet money, the kind that never had to raise its voice. The Ridgemont sat at the end of Whitmore Avenue like a crown jewel, red brick facade, black iron lanterns flanking double oak doors, a hand-painted sign in gold cursive. For 22 years, this restaurant had served the same crowd: lawyers, surgeons, retired executives, country club regulars. The kind of place where the hostess knew your name before you reached the door, and your usual drink arrived before you opened the menu. Mitchell Osborne pulled into the parking lot in a 12-year-old Honda Accord. The paint had faded from black to a tired gray. A hairline crack ran across the windshield. On the passenger seat sat a leather portfolio, dark brown, scratched at the corners, stuffed thick with documents. He didn't reach for it. Not yet. He stepped out and stretched. Faded olive jacket frayed at the shoulders, wrinkled khaki pants, worn-out sneakers that had seen better days 3 years ago. No watch. No ring. No cologne. If you passed him on the street, you'd think delivery driver, maybe Uber. You wouldn't think twice. Mitchell looked up at the restaurant. Not the way a customer looks at a place he's about to eat. More like a man standing in front of a house he just bought, deciding which walls to knock down first. His eyes moved from the sign to the windows to the side entrance where employees came and went. He took a slow breath, then walked toward the front door. Inside, the Ridgemont hummed with its usual Tuesday rhythm. Candles flickered on white linen tablecloths. A piano player worked through soft jazz standards in the corner. The smell of charred ribeye and red wine reduction drifted from the kitchen every time the swinging door opened. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter floated between tables, the comfortable, unhurried laughter of people who had never once worried about the bill. Garrett Harmon stood at the host stand like a general surveying his territory. Navy suit, silk tie, gold cufflinks. Hair slicked back with so much pomade it looked painted on. His shoes reflected the chandelier above him. He smiled wide at a silver-haired couple walking in. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield, wonderful to see you again," and guided them to their usual table by the window with his hand on the small of Mrs. Whitfield's back. Warm, attentive, the perfect host. But watch his eyes. Watch how they moved across the room between greetings, scanning, calculating, sorting guests into categories that only he understood. Which tables tipped well? Which guests had connections? Which ones mattered? He'd been running the Ridgemont for 8 years. Not as the owner, as the general manager. But the line between those two titles had blurred a long time ago. The previous owner, a 71-year-old man named Gerald Whitaker, had stopped coming in 3 years ago. Health problems. Lost interest. Let Garrett handle everything, the staff, the menu, the vendors, the complaints, all of it. Garrett didn't just manage this restaurant. He was this restaurant. At least that's what he believed. Paige Shelton slipped past the host stand carrying a tray of water glasses. 22 years old, thin ponytail, wrinkled apron, sneakers she'd bought on clearance. She'd been working here 3 months and still hadn't figured out the unwritten rules. Who to serve first, who to smile at longer, who to avoid eye contact with. She set the glasses down at table 9 and hurried back, head low, trying to stay invisible. Garrett's eyes followed her for a second, then dismissed her. The front door opened. Mitchell Osborne stepped inside. He stood at the entrance and waited, hands at his sides. No reservation, no companion, just a tall, thin black man in a faded jacket standing alone in a restaurant where every other face was white. The hostess, a young blonde woman named Kelsey, looked up. Her smile flickered, just for a second. Her eyes traveled from his sneakers to his jacket to his face, then back down to her reservation book. "Good evening, do you have a reservation?" "No, just a table for one." Kelsey glanced toward Garrett, a quick look, the kind that asked permission without using words. Garrett stood 15 feet away. He'd already seen Mitchell walk in, already made his assessment. He gave Kelsey a short nod, the kind that said, "Handle it, but don't give him anything good." "Of course."
"Right this way." She led Mitchell past the window tables, past the fireplace section, past the curved leather booths, all the way to the back corner. Table 23. Wedged between the kitchen door and the service hallway. The table where you put someone you didn't want other guests to see. Mitchell sat down, opened the menu, and said nothing. The menu at the Ridgemont was the kind that didn't list prices on the front page. You had to flip to the back, past the wine pairings and the chef's tasting notes, to find them printed small, almost apologetic, as if the restaurant was embarrassed to mention money at all. Mitchell read through it slowly, took his time, no rush. 15 minutes passed. No water, no bread, no server. At table 12, 6 feet away, a couple in their 50s had walked in after Mitchell. The woman wore pearls. The man wore a blazer with brass buttons. Before they'd even unfolded their napkins, a server appeared with 2 glasses of sparkling water, a bread basket wrapped in white cloth, and a separate menu, handwritten, listing the evening's specials. "The duck tonight is phenomenal," the server told them. "Chef's been working on the glaze all afternoon." Mitchell watched this from the corner of his eye, said nothing, folded his hands on the table, and waited. Another 5 minutes. A busboy walked past carrying a tub of dirty dishes. He glanced at Mitchell's empty table, no water, no silverware set, nothing, and kept walking. 2 other servers crossed the dining room during that stretch. Neither looked in his direction. It wasn't that they didn't see him. They saw him fine. They just didn't see a reason to rush. Then Paige appeared, a little out of breath, ponytail half undone. "I'm so sorry about the wait. Can I get you started with something to drink?" "Just water, please." "Of course." "And are you ready to order, or do you need a few more minutes?"
"I'll go ahead. The ribeye medium rare, house salad. That's it." Paige scribbled it down. "Great choices. I'll get that water right out." She smiled a real smile, not the calculated one the hostess had given him, and hurried off. Mitchell noticed. He noticed things like that, the difference between a real smile and a performance. 3 minutes later, Paige set a glass of water on his table, ice cold, lemon wedge on the rim, the small thing that nobody else had bothered to do. "Your steak should be about 20 minutes. Can I get you anything else while you wait?" "No, thank you. I'm fine." She nodded and left. 12 minutes into Mitchell's wait for his steak, Garrett Harmon made his first pass. He walked through the dining room the way he always did, slow hands clasped behind his back, nodding at regulars, pausing to compliment a woman's necklace, laughing at a man's joke about golf. The lord of the manor, making his rounds. Every step deliberate, every smile earned or withheld, depending on who was sitting in front of him. He reached the back corner, stopped. His eyes landed on Mitchell's table, studied it. One man, faded jacket, no companion, water glass with a lemon wedge. One of his worst tables occupied on a Tuesday night when the restaurant was 3/4 full. Something about it bothered him, the way a crooked painting bothers a perfectionist. He turned to Paige, who was passing with a tray of appetizers.
Table 23. What did he order? Paige hesitated. Ribeye, medium rare, house salad. Did you run his card first? Run his, she blinked. No, we don't do that. We do tonight. Garrett said it loud enough for Mitchell to hear. Not shouting, he never shouted, just that particular volume that carried across 3 tables without seeming to try. The volume of a man who wanted someone to know they were being talked about. Sir, we've never pre-authorized a card before. I said run it. He straightened his cufflinks. Some customers require additional verification. It's about protecting the restaurant. He glanced back at Mitchell, a long, slow look, the kind you'd give a stray dog that wandered into a party. Not angry, not threatened, just annoyed at the inconvenience of its presence. Mitchell heard every word. His jaw tightened just slightly, just for a second. Then it relaxed. He took a sip of water and looked out the window at the parking lot where his Honda sat between a Mercedes and a BMW. Paige walked back to Mitchell's table. Her cheeks were flushed. I'm really sorry, sir. My manager is asking if you could... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't look him in the eye. He wants to run my card before the food comes out. Yes, I'm sorry. Mitchell reached into his back pocket, pulled out a plain black wallet, handed her a Visa. Go ahead. Paige took it and walked quickly toward the register. Her hands were trembling, not from cold. The card cleared. Of course it cleared. It would have cleared if the bill was 10 times higher. But Paige didn't know that. Nobody at the Ridgemont knew that. They saw the jacket, the sneakers, the face, and made their calculations. Garrett watched the transaction from the bar. When the approval came through, his expression didn't change. No relief, no embarrassment. He simply moved on as if the whole exercise had been perfectly routine. That was the most unsettling part. He didn't even think he'd done anything wrong. 26 minutes after ordering, Mitchell's steak arrived. The couple at table 12, the ones who'd walked in after him, were already halfway through dessert. Mitchell cut into the ribeye. Pink juices pooled on the plate. He chewed. Stopped. Cut another piece. Chewed again. Well done. Charred through. Gray in the center. He'd ordered medium rare. He set down his knife and fork. Waited for Paige. She came by 2 minutes later. How's everything? The steak is well done. I ordered medium rare. Paige's face fell. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. Let me get that fixed right away. I'll talk to the kitchen. It's not your fault. She picked up the plate and rushed toward the kitchen. On her way, she passed Garrett, who was leaning against the bar, swirling a glass of sparkling water like it was champagne. What's wrong with 23? His steak came out wrong. I'm getting a new one fired. Garrett didn't look up from his glass. Or, and this is just a thought, if the gentleman isn't satisfied with our kitchen, there are plenty of other restaurants in town that might be more suited to his taste. He said it casually, like a suggestion between friends. But Paige heard what was underneath. She'd been hearing things like that for 3 months, comments wrapped in politeness, discrimination disguised as professional standards, cruelty that always had a reasonable explanation. She didn't respond, just pushed through the kitchen door. Mitchell sat at table 23 and waited. No steak, no water refill, no apology from management, just the hum of conversation around him, and the occasional glance from other tables. Quick, furtive looks that slid off him like he was a stain someone was trying not to notice. At table 7, an older couple, white-haired, well-dressed, had been watching. The woman leaned toward her husband. Harold, did you see what that manager just did? He made that poor man verify his card. Harold shifted in his seat. Let's not get involved, Carol. But it's not right. Carol, please. She pressed her lips together and looked down at her plate. Said nothing more. Garrett noticed the exchange from across the room. He read it instantly, a crack in the atmosphere. A guest, looking uncomfortable. Unacceptable. He was at their table in 4 strides. "Mr. and Mrs. Dalton, how is the halibut tonight? Chef told me he sourced it fresh from the coast this morning." He topped off their wine without asking, leaned in close. "And I have to say, Mrs. Dalton, that brooch is absolutely stunning." Carol Dalton touched her brooch and managed a thin smile. Harold exhaled. The subject changed. The moment passed. Whatever discomfort had surfaced was smoothed over like a wrinkle in a tablecloth. That was Garrett's gift, not hospitality control. He could read a room the way a chess player reads a board, see the problem before it became a problem, neutralize it with a compliment, a pour of wine, a warm hand on the shoulder. 8 years of practice. 8 years of making things disappear. But tonight, he'd met something that wouldn't disappear. Paige came back with a new steak, medium rare this time. She set it down gently. "Again, I'm so sorry about the wait." Mitchell looked up at her. "You've been the only good thing about this place tonight." Paige didn't know what to say to that. She just nodded, blinked hard, and walked away. Mitchell ate his steak in silence. It was cooked right this time. The salad was crisp. The meal by any standard was fine. But the taste in his mouth had nothing to do with food. He finished, set his napkin on the table, and waited for the bill. The bill came in a black leather folder. Paige set it down with a small smile. No rush at all. Mitchell opened it. $84.60. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp $100 bill and tucked it inside the folder. Clean. Simple. The way a man pays for a meal when he has nothing to prove. Paige picked up the folder. "I'll be right back with your change." She walked to the register, rang it up, and counted out the difference. $15.40. A 10, a 5, and the rest in coins. 2 quarters, 3 dimes, a nickel, and a penny. She placed them neatly on a small dish and carried it back toward table 23. She never made it. Garrett intercepted her halfway across the dining room. He didn't ask. He reached over and lifted the dish out of her hands. "I'll take care of this one." "Sir, I can handle." "I said I'll take care of it." Paige stopped, watched him walk toward Mitchell's table with the dish balanced on his palm. Something about his stride was different. Not the usual smooth glide. This was deliberate, purposeful. Like a man walking towards something he'd been wanting to do all evening. Garrett set the dish down, looked at the coins, then looked at Mitchell. His lip curled. For a moment, nothing happened. The restaurant hummed, forks against plates, glasses clinking, a woman laughing 3 tables away. Nobody noticed the manager standing over the man in the faded jacket. Then Garrett picked up the dish, held it at chest height, and flipped it. Coins exploded across the marble floor, quarters cracked and spun, dimes scattered under chairs. The nickel skipped across the tile and hit the baseboard with a sharp ping. The 10 and the 5 fluttered down and landed on Mitchell's shoes. The piano player stopped mid-note. Every head in the restaurant turned. "Here's your change, you broke piece of trash." Mitchell stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the floor. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. "Sir, I paid you in full. Because that's all a worthless nobody like you deserves." Garrett seized Mitchell's collar with both hands and wrenched him forward until their faces were inches apart. His breath reeked of peppermint and contempt. Coins. The filthiest money in this country. Perfect for filth like you. "But sir, I paid you properly." "Shut your mouth." Garrett twisted the collar tighter and drove Mitchell to his knees. The impact sent a jolt through his kneecaps. Mitchell's palms slapped the cold marble right on top of the scattered coins. The sharp edge of a quarter dug into his skin. A thin line of blood appeared across his palm. Garrett kicked a dime across the floor. It hit Mitchell's knee. On your knees, begging for coins. That's your whole miserable life. Mitchell stayed down, not because he couldn't stand, not because he was afraid. He stayed because he'd learned long ago the hard way that a black man who fights back in a room full of white witnesses doesn't get called brave. He gets called dangerous. So he stayed, and he breathed, and he waited. Garrett straightened his jacket, rolled his neck, turned to face the room, 40 guests frozen in their seats, forks suspended, napkins clutched, mouths half open. He wasn't embarrassed. He was performing. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. The situation is being handled. He turned back to Mitchell and grabbed his collar again, yanked him to his feet like a rag doll, shoved him hard toward the door. Mitchell stumbled, caught himself on the edge of a table. A water glass toppled and shattered on the floor. "Security!" 2 men in black polos appeared from the hallway near the kitchen. Garrett pointed at Mitchell the way you'd point at a stain on the carpet. "Get him out, now!" The first guard grabbed Mitchell's right arm. The second grabbed his left. Mitchell didn't resist. His body went limp between them, not out of weakness, but out of something that looked like surrender and wasn't. They dragged him across the dining room, past the fireplace, past the window tables, past the host stand where Kelsey stared at the floor. His sneakers squeaked against the marble. The bills on his shoes, the 10 and the 5, fell off somewhere along the way. Nobody picked them up. 40 guests watched a man get dragged across a restaurant floor. Not one stood. Not one spoke. Not one reached for a phone except one. A man at table 4, late 20s, quietly held his phone at an angle. Recording. He didn't say a word. Then Paige moved. She'd been standing near the bar, frozen, both hands gripping an empty tray so hard her knuckles had gone white. She watched them drag Mitchell past her, watched the coins still scattered across the floor, quarters, dimes, a nickel, a penny glinting under the chandelier like something thrown away. She set down the tray, walked to the center of the dining room, and got on her knees. She picked up the first quarter, then a dime, then another. One by one, coin by coin, she gathered them off the cold marble and placed them in her cupped palm. Garrett saw her from across the room. "Shelton, what do you think you're doing?" She didn't look up. "Leave those on the floor, that's not your job." She picked up another quarter, then the nickel. "Shelton, get up, that's an order." Her hands were shaking. Her jaw was clenched so tight her teeth ached, but she didn't stop. She crawled under a table to reach a dime, found the penny near the baseboard, picked up every single coin until there was nothing left on that floor. Then she stood, walked to the bar, set the coins down in a neat stack on the counter. $15.40. Every cent accounted for. Garrett stared at her. The room stared at her. She stared straight ahead at nothing. A tear ran down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. Nobody said a word. Outside, Mitchell Osborne stood in the parking lot. The evening air was cool against his face. Crickets hummed in the hedges along the property line. His collar was stretched and twisted. His knees throbbed. A thin red line ran across his right palm where the quarter had sliced him. Blood smeared against his khaki pants when he wiped it. He didn't go to his car. He stood still for a long moment, looking up at the darkening sky. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. One call. 9 seconds. "It's Mitchell. Move the meeting up. I want everyone here in 30 minutes. He hung up, slid the phone back, leaned against the hood of his Honda and crossed his arms. His face showed nothing. Not anger, not humiliation, not sadness. Just patience. The deep, heavy, immovable patience of a man who had been underestimated his entire life and had learned to make that work for him. Inside, Garrett was already rewriting history. "Everyone again, I sincerely apologize for that disruption." He moved through the dining room like nothing had happened, topped off a wine glass at table 6, squeezed a shoulder at table 10, laughed at something at the bar. His machine grinding back into place, smoothing over the cracks. He stopped at the host stand, straightened a stack of menus, turned to Kelsey. "Crisis handled." Kelsey didn't respond. She was looking past him through the glass doors into the parking lot at the man in the faded jacket still leaning on his car. Still there, not leaving. Behind the bar, Paige stood against the wall. A coworker, another server named Danny, leaned over. "What the hell was that? You trying to get fired?" Paige looked at the coins on the counter. $15.40. "Somebody had to pick them up," she said. Danny shook his head and walked away. Paige stayed, hands trembling, heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know who the man was. Didn't know what was coming. She just knew what she'd seen was wrong, and she was the only one who'd done a single thing about it. 28 minutes passed. Garrett worked the room. The piano player started again. Conversations resumed. The machine hummed along as if nothing had ever happened. Then headlights cut across the parking lot. 3 black SUVs pulled in, one after another, clean, polished, tinted windows. They parked along the curb near the entrance, not in the spaces, but in a row, the way people park when they're not staying long and don't care about the rules. Mitchell pushed off the hood of his Honda, straightened his jacket, the same faded olive jacket with the frayed shoulders and the blood smear on the sleeve. Donald Pratt stepped out first. Charcoal 3-piece suit, silver-framed glasses, leather briefcase that cost more than most people's rent. Then, Nina Caldwell. Black suit, hair pulled tight, heels clicking sharp on the asphalt. Then 2 associates carrying document boxes. They gathered around Mitchell. No handshakes, no small talk. Just a nod from Donald that said, "Everything is ready." Mitchell looked at the restaurant one last time. The warm glow behind the windows, the gold cursive sign, the black iron lanterns. He rolled his shoulders, wiped the dried blood off his palm. "Let's go," he said, and walked back inside. "Hold on, sit with this. This man paid his bill. Full price. Got his change thrown at him. Got dragged out on his knees in front of 40 people. If you're standing in that parking lot right now, what do? Walk away? Call the cops?" Because what he did next, nobody saw coming. The front door of the Ridgemont opened for the second time that evening, and for the second time, Mitchell Osborne walked in. But everything about the entrance was different now. Donald Pratt came through first, 6'2", silver hair trimmed close. Charcoal 3-piece suit that fit like it had been sewn onto his body. He didn't look around, didn't admire the decor. He walked straight to the host stand with the stride of a man who entered rooms expecting them to rearrange themselves around him. Nina Caldwell followed. Black suit, hair pulled so tight it sharpened her cheekbones, heels striking the marble in a rhythm that made 2 servers step out of her way without being asked. She carried a slim tablet in one hand and nothing else. Behind them, 2 associates, a man and a woman, both in dark suits, carried document boxes stamped with a law firm's letterhead. Then Mitchell. Same faded jacket, same wrinkled khakis, same worn sneakers. Blood smear still visible on his right sleeve. He walked in last, hands in his pockets, like a man returning to pick up something he'd forgotten. Garrett spotted the group from across the dining room. His eyes went wide, not with fear, but with excitement. 4 people in expensive suits walking into his restaurant on a Tuesday night. This was exactly the kind of clientele he lived for. He checked his reflection in the bar mirror, adjusted his tie, and crossed the floor. "Good evening, welcome to the Ridgemont." He extended his hand to Donald, full smile, maximum wattage. "I'm Garrett Harmon, general manager. How can I make your evening exceptional?" Donald looked at the hand, didn't take it. "We have an appointment, the ownership transfer meeting. I believe you were informed." Garrett's smile dimmed just a fraction. "Of course, yes, we've been expecting the new ownership group." He glanced behind Donald at the associates at Nina, trying to identify who the buyer was. His eyes skipped right over Mitchell, twice. "If you'll follow me, I've prepared the private dining room." "Before we sit down," Nina said, her voice cutting through Garrett's hospitality like a scalpel, "let me make introductions." She stepped to the side and extended her hand toward Mitchell. "Mr. Harmon, this is Mr. Mitchell Osborne, Chairman and CEO of Osborne Hospitality Group." She paused, let the words land. As of 5 o'clock this afternoon, Mr. Osborne is the sole owner of the Ridgemont. The silence that followed was the loudest sound that restaurant had ever produced. Garrett's face went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, terror. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. He looked at Mitchell, really looked at him for the first time, and the blood drained from his face so fast it left his skin the color of the tablecloths. That's not... He stepped back. His heel caught the edge of a chair. He stumbled, caught himself on a table. A bread basket toppled. A glass of water tipped and spilled across the white linen. Mitchell didn't react. He just stood there, hands still in his pockets, the same calm he'd carried all evening, through the wait, through the card check, through the wrong steak, through the coins on the floor, through being dragged across the room by security. The same calm, unbroken. He looked at Garrett the way you look at a math problem you've already solved. You seem surprised. Garrett's mouth worked. Sir, Mr. Osborne, I had no idea. If I had known... If you had known what? You would have treated me like a human being. Mitchell tilted his head. That's an interesting thing to admit. Donald Pratt opened his briefcase on the nearest table, pulled out a stack of documents, laid them flat. The deed of sale, the transfer agreement, the corporate filings. Osborne Hospitality Group's letterhead across every page. Mitchell's signature at the bottom of each one, dated that afternoon. Mr. Harmon. Donald said, his voice the temperature of a walk-in freezer. For the record, Mr. Osborne completed the acquisition of this property at 4:58 p.m. today. Full cash purchase, no financing, no partners. He has been the legal owner of this establishment for approximately 4 hours. 4 hours. Garrett had thrown the owner's change on the floor, called him trash, forced him to his knees and had him dragged out by security. And the man had owned the building the entire time. Mitchell pulled out a chair, the chair at the head of the table, sat down, crossed his legs, placed the leather portfolio, the one that had been sitting on the passenger seat of his Honda all evening, on the table and opened it. Sit down, Garrett. Not Mr. Harmon, not Sir, Garrett. Garrett sat. His legs barely held him. The chair creaked under the sudden weight of a man whose world had just collapsed. Nina opened her tablet and set it on the table facing Garrett. On the screen, security camera footage from the Ridgemont's own system, time-stamped, high definition. The camera above the register had captured everything, Garrett intercepting the dish, flipping the coins, grabbing Mitchell's collar, forcing him to his knees, kicking the dime, ordering security. Every second, every angle, crystal clear. That's your own camera system, Mitchell said, but it's not the only footage. Nina swiped. A Twitter post. A video, shaky phone-quality shot from table 4 by the young man who'd held his phone at an angle. Already posted, already shared, already climbing. 43,000 views, and counting. Mitchell leaned forward, folded his hands on the table, looked Garrett dead in the eyes. Now, let's talk about what happened with those coins. Garrett opened his mouth 3 times before words came out. Mr. Osborne, sir, this was a misunderstanding. I was following protocol. We have standards, dress code, conduct, expectations. I was just doing my job. Your job. Mitchell repeated the words like he was tasting something rotten. Your job was to throw a customer's change on the floor. That's not, I didn't mean... Your job was to grab a man by the collar and force him to his knees. Garrett's mouth closed. His hands gripped the table, knuckles white. Mitchell didn't raise his voice, didn't lean forward. He spoke the way a man speaks when he doesn't need volume. Quiet, steady, devastating. 8 years you've run this place, and in those 8 years, how many people have you treated the way you treated me tonight? The question hung like smoke. Garrett's eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, a rescue. But servers stood along the walls like statues. Kelsey stared at the reservation book. Nobody was coming. It was a mistake, one mistake. We'll see about that. Mitchell turned to Donald. Go ahead. Donald slid a single sheet across the table.
Mr. Harmon, effective immediately. Your employment with the Ridgemont is terminated. Cause: gross misconduct, physical assault on a patron, discriminatory behavior in violation of federal and state civil rights statutes, and conduct unbecoming of a managerial representative. Donald's voice carried the warmth of a legal filing. You will surrender your keys and access credentials before leaving tonight. Any outstanding compensation will be reviewed by counsel. Garrett stared at the paper. His hands were shaking, the same hands that had grabbed Mitchell's collar, the same hands that had flipped the dish. You can't. 8 years. I gave this place 8 years.
Mitchell looked at him, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with something worse, clarity. 8 years. And the first thing you did when a black man sat down in your restaurant was decide he didn't belong. Garrett opened his mouth, closed it. Nothing left to say. Mitchell turned to the 2 security guards near the hallway, the same 2 men in black polos who had dragged him across this floor 45 minutes ago. Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Harmon out. The same hands that had gripped Mitchell's arms now closed around Garrett's, gently but firmly. The same path across the dining room, past the fireplace, past the window tables, past the host stand. The same marble, the same chandelier, the same 40 guests watching. But this time, the man being removed wore a silk tie and gold cufflinks. Garrett walked past the spot where the coins had scattered. The marble was clean, but he could still hear them quarters cracking, dimes spinning, the nickel hitting the baseboard. He would hear them for a long time. The front door closed behind him. Inside, Mitchell turned to Nina, the server who picked up the coins. Bring her in. 2 minutes later, Paige walked into the private dining room, apron wrinkled, eyes red. She stood like a student braced for punishment. Do you know who I am? They just told me. You're the new owner. Sit down. She sat, hands trembling in her lap. 20 years in this industry, hundreds of hires. Do you know the hardest thing to find? Paige shook her head. Someone who does the right thing when it costs them something. Mitchell leaned forward. 40 people in that room tonight. You were the only one who moved, the only one who got on her knees and picked up those coins when the man who controlled your paycheck told you to stop. Paige's chin quivered. Starting tomorrow, assistant front of house manager. Double your salary. Full benefits. You report directly to me. A tear slid down her cheek, different from the one before. This one was warm. I don't know what to say. You don't have to. You already said it. On your knees, on that floor. Paige stood, walked to the door, stopped. Mr. Osborne? Yes. Thank you for coming back. Mitchell smiled, the first real smile he'd allowed himself all evening. Thank you for staying. The video hit the internet at 9:47 that night. The man at table 4, the one who'd held his phone at an angle while Mitchell was being dragged across the dining room, posted it on Twitter with 6 words. This just happened at the Ridgemont. 43 seconds of footage, shaky, phone quality, but every frame was damning. Garrett flipping the dish, coins exploding across the marble, Garrett grabbing Mitchell's collar, Mitchell on his knees, the kick, the drag, and through it all, the silence. 40 people watching, not one moving. By midnight, it had 200,000 views. By sunrise, it had crossed 1 million. By the following evening, it was everywhere. Hashtag coins on the floor started trending at 6 a.m. By noon, it was the #1 hashtag in the United States. Local news picked it up first. Channel 9 ran it on the morning broadcast with the headline, "Restaurant manager hurls coins at black customer, didn't know he was the new owner." The anchor called it disturbing. The weatherman watched the clip off camera and shook his head. By the afternoon cycle, every local station in the tri-state area had picked it up. Then national, CNN, MSNBC, Fox. The story had everything the algorithm loved: race, power, humiliation, reversal,
justice. A clip package ran on the evening news with split-screen commentary. Pundits debated. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag coins on the floor became hashtag justice at the Ridgemont became hashtag fire Garrett Harmon. Garrett Harmon's name was public within 12 hours. His photo, the one from his LinkedIn profile, navy suit, confident smile, arms crossed, circulated on every platform. People screenshot it, memed it. Someone put it next to the frame of him kicking the dime at Mitchell's knee with the caption, "Same energy." Garrett's phone rang 46 times the first day. He answered none of them. His voicemail filled up. His email inbox overflowed. A reporter from the local paper showed up at his front door at 7 in the morning. He watched her through the blinds and didn't open. He released a statement through a lawyer that afternoon. 3 sentences. Mr. Harmon deeply regrets the incident at the Ridgemont. The interaction was taken out of context and does not reflect his character or values. He looks forward to sharing his side of the story at the appropriate time. The internet ate it alive. Taken out of context became its own meme. Someone created a parody account called @OutOfContextGarrett that posted the video on loop with increasingly absurd context explanations. It gained 80,000 followers in 2 days. But the video was only the beginning. Mitchell ordered a full internal audit of Garrett's 8-year tenure at the Ridgemont. He brought in an outside HR firm, Whitfield and Associates, specialists in workplace discrimination investigations. They started with the staff, interviewed every current employee, then tracked down former ones. The pattern emerged within the first week. 12 formal complaints had been filed against Garrett Harmon over the past 5 years. 12. All from employees or customers of color, all documented, all filed through the restaurant's internal system. And every single one had been marked resolved by the previous owner, Gerald Whitaker, without any investigation, without any disciplinary action, without even a written warning in Garrett's file. Resolved. The word sat in the report like a lie with a stamp on it. The complaints told a story that spanned years. A black couple asked to prepay their entire meal before being seated. No white customer had ever been asked. A Latino server written up for unprofessional appearance, while white servers with identical grooming went unmentioned. A reservation canceled without explanation after a guest's name sounded ethnic. Garrett's words, according to the hostess who'd processed the call. Then the former employees came forward. The first was a woman named Denise Warren, 34, black. She'd worked at the Ridgemont as a server for 2 years. She posted a video on TikTok the day after the coin footage went viral. 3 minutes, no edits, just her face and her voice. She described how Garrett had pulled her aside during her 3rd month and told her she didn't fit the visual identity of the restaurant. She was moved from the dining room to the kitchen, bussing tables, washing dishes, restocking supplies. When she asked why Garrett told her she should be grateful she still had a job. 6 months later, she was let go. The reason on her termination form: performance issues. She'd never received a single written warning. Her video got 4 million views. The second was a man named Jerome Ellis, 28, black, former bartender. He lasted 14 months. He described a pattern. Garrett would schedule him exclusively on slow weekday shifts, then cite his low tip earnings as evidence of poor performance. When Jerome complained, Garrett told him, "Maybe this isn't the right fit for you." He was terminated 2 weeks later. Reason? Restructuring. Jerome didn't post a video. He called a lawyer. Within 10 days of the coin incident, both Denise and Jerome filed civil lawsuits against the Ridgemont, wrongful termination, and racial discrimination. Their attorney held a press conference outside the county courthouse. The photo, 2 former employees standing behind a podium with the restaurant's name on every microphone, ran on the front page of 3 newspapers.
The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission opened a formal investigation on day 12. Federal. The kind that doesn't go away with a statement from a lawyer. Garrett hired his own attorney. A mid-level guy from a small firm, the best he could afford. The retainer alone drained his savings. His wife stopped answering the home phone. His son's school called to ask if everything was okay at home after classmates showed the video on their phones during lunch. No restaurant in the city would touch him. His name had become shorthand for discrimination in the hospitality industry. A trade magazine ran a piece titled, "The Ridgemont Effect: How One Video Changed Hiring Practices Across the Region." Garrett Harmon was mentioned 14 times, not once favorably. 3 months after the incident, Garrett settled both lawsuits out of court. The terms were confidential, but the checks cleared, and they weren't small. His retirement fund, gone. His savings, gone. 8 years of building what he thought was an untouchable career, dismantled in 90 days by a dish of coins he chose to throw on the floor. And still, he wouldn't admit it. In his only public interview given to a local podcast 4 months later, Garrett said, "I was under a lot of pressure that night. The situation escalated. Things were taken out of context. I'm not a racist. I treated everyone the same." The host asked him, "Would you have thrown those coins at a white customer?" Garrett paused for 11 seconds. The audio captured every one of them. "I don't think that's a fair question," he said. The clip went viral, again. 6 months later, the Ridgemont looked the same from the outside. Same red brick, same iron lanterns, same gold sign. But step inside on a Friday evening and you'd feel it. Something fundamental had shifted. The dining room was full. Not just full, alive. A young black couple sat at the window table, the one that used to be reserved for the Whitfields. A Latino family of 5 occupied the leather booth near the fireplace. Kids coloring on paper placemats the restaurant had never offered before. An elderly white man chatted with the new bartender, a 26-year-old black woman named Tara, who made the best old-fashioned in the county and had a laugh that carried across the room like music. The staff moved differently. No more glancing at the host stand for approval. No more whispering. No more sorting guests into invisible categories. The dress code still existed, printed on the website, applied equally enforced without judgment. The unwritten rules were gone, replaced with ones that were written down, trained on, and followed. Paige Shelton stood near the entrance in a fitted black blazer. No more wrinkled apron, no more clearance sneakers. Name tag on her lapel. Paige Shelton, front of house manager. Not assistant, not interim, manager. She'd earned it in 4 months, 16-hour days, mastering the reservation system, retraining the front staff, handling a kitchen fire and 2 private events without calling anyone for help. She greeted every guest the same way. Eye contact, real smile, first name if she knew it. No scanning, no sorting, no hesitation. Revenue was up 31%. Not from the viral video that traffic faded after a month, because the food was better, the service was better, the atmosphere was better. Word spread. New regulars appeared. A food critic gave it 4 stars and wrote that the Ridgemont had finally become the restaurant it always pretended to be. Mitchell came in most Fridays, always alone. Tonight, Paige smiled at the door. "The usual, Mr. Osborne. The usual." She led him to table 23, back corner, between the kitchen door and the service hallway. The table where they'd seated him 6 months ago, the one meant for people they didn't want anyone to see. He'd never asked for a different table, not once. He sat there every Friday, not because he had to, because it reminded him of where that night started, of what happened on this floor, of what it took to change a place from the inside. Ribeye, medium rare, house salad, water with lemon, same order, always. While he waited, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single quarter, set it on the white tablecloth. Didn't spin it, didn't study it, just placed it there centered upright like a small monument to a night that changed everything. Candlelight caught the coin's edge. A thin line of gold stretched across the linen. Mitchell looked out at the dining room, at the faces, the colors, The noise, real noise, the kind that only happens when people feel genuinely welcome. He watched Paige guide a nervous young couple to their first table. Watched Tara slide a cocktail across the bar with a wink. Watched a little girl in the booth wave at him with a crayon in her fist. He waved back, then picked up the quarter, slipped it into his pocket, and smiled. Some coins belong on the floor, some don't. Man, that is messed up. Imagine you pay for your meal full price, and the manager throws your change at your chest and forces you to your knees, in front of everyone, and nobody does a thing. What would you do? Drop a comment, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you next time.